What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this video. If you're new here, press that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos, and welcome to the video. So today I thought I would talk about my top favorite episodes of Scooby-Doo. So what I've done is I've taken my favorite episode from each series, almost, and I'm just basically gonna do what I did with the top 5 favorite movies, talk about why they're my favorite. So we're gonna start with Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Of course, where it all began.
We can count on you to be Scooby-Doo. I know we catch that bill.
So my favorite episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Is actually a clue for Scooby-Doo. This episode is the one with Captain Cutler. You know, it's the one when they go underwater. And I love this episode. I love the villain, love the aesthetic of it, you know, just the feeling of it. It's one of the earliest episodes I remember watching. One of the reasons I really enjoy this episode is when they're underwater, they actually did this really cool effect. And I don't know how they did it, but it's probably really easy, honestly. But they put almost an overlay over the screen, so it looks like as if you're watching it through, it's like you're watching a screen that's inside of a tank, like an aquarium tank. And there's just this very natural but very cool water ripple effect almost, and it's just aesthetically pleasing to me. But also just the overall story of this episode, I really enjoyed that the villain was actually the actual person, you know, because they're calling it the ghost of Captain Cutler, when in reality it's Captain Cutler who's portraying himself as the ghost of himself. I thought that was a really cool, interesting story, especially for the very first series. I believe it's episode 2 or 3, depending on who you ask. And so I really enjoy this episode. I just think it has a cool aesthetic. The villain is unique, the criminal is unique, and it's one of my favorites. So for the new Scooby-Doo movies, my favorite episode of this series is the Frickert Fracas. This is the one that guest stars Jonathan Winters, and you know, they go help at this farm, and there's a scarecrow haunting the farm and whatever. And this is an episode that I remember watching the most of this series. I remember when I was young, I would sometimes go with my mom to the houses that she would clean. My mom used to clean houses, and I would go sometimes with her. A lot of the people that she cleaned houses for, obviously, we knew, and so they were okay that I would go and chill. But these people had the Boomerang channel, and so I always loved going to these houses because I could watch Boomerang. You know, again, we knew each other, so they were chill if I just chilled and watched TV. And so I go to watch the Boomerang channel, and this is one of the episodes I remember watching the most. This is one of the episodes I remember always being on, and so it's one of my favorites. I love Jonathan Winters. He was just such a cool, fun guest star to have on the episode. I never really knew him until I watched the episode, but now, you know, I thought it was a lot of fun, and I love how they incorporated one of the characters that he created for his comedy shows into the episode. I thought that was really unique and cool aspect that they added into this episode. Now for the Scooby-Doo Show,
That's my pal, Scooby-Doo.
My favorite episode of this series is Watch Out the Willowa. Now, this one's kind of weird. This is one of those episodes that I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone to watch, but it's one of my favorites. I know that sounds super weird. Now, I don't think this is one of the best Scooby-Doo episodes out there, but I just think it is one of the most unique episodes and most forgotten episodes of Scooby-Doo out there. I thought the villain in this episode was pretty unique, you know, like this giant owl and then his owl henchman. And I loved the story that they're going to see Velma's uncle because, you know, he wrote her a distress letter and whatever. And when they get there, he had been kidnapped and everything. And I just feel like this episode kind of portrays a Stranded-esque feeling, you know, they're the only ones, and they have to find her uncle and everything. Yet they do find, you know, some Native Americans there, and they kind of warn them and whatever. But I really enjoy this episode, and it's actually the very first episode of season 3 of the Scooby-Doo show, or Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? However you want to use, that's a whole nother thing. But I just really like the uniqueness of this episode and the fact that it isn't one of the most popular episodes out there of Scooby-Doo. I just remember some of the jokes in this episode, like when Shaggy and Scooby are supposed to be sleeping in the boat and whatever, you know, keeping watch, and they're just like shaking and whatever, and you know, they're kind of like peeking up, and I just remember one of them like pushes down the other's head, you know, it's like, no, get down, he can't get you if you're down and whatever. And I don't know, I find this one a fun episode. Okay, for the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show,
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
my favorite episode is The Demon of the Dugout. I remember this episode the most thinking of the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo series. It's the one that comes to mind when I hear about this series. I really liked that they went somewhere international for this mystery, and I liked how the villain kind of connected to where they went and visited, and yet they were going for more or less an American event. I just found this one very interesting, and one of the clues in this episode I thought was super interesting. Velma accidentally drops this trophy that has this like diamond jewel and whatever, and we don't realize it at the time, but then she explains, you know, once they unmask the villain, that she did it on purpose to see if the diamond would scratch the glass and whatever. And you know, I just felt like this one had some really cool mystery solving aspects into the episode that I found really enjoyable. Plus, you know, it's one of my favorite series. I love the first season of the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, and you know, I just remember this episode a lot. I just found it enjoyable, and you know, this is one I would recommend. Now for the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries, my favorite is Wedding Bell Booze. This is kind of one of those episodes where if you had the chance to watch it on the VHS, then you know what it is. If not, then it's this elusive, rare episode, you know. But I've been lucky enough to have the VHS and been able to watch it. But I enjoy this episode because I remember renting this episode back when video rental places were still a thing, when you could like go into Hollywood Video or Blockbuster and rent videos for like a week. I remember renting this one at one time, and the VHS was really bad. Like, someone had like put the VHS into their player and it like ribboned, I guess you could say, the tape. And so there was like this really weird line and jittering the entire way through the tape. But I was so determined to watch this that I just pushed through it, even with all the shaky and the lines and I was like, you know what, whatever, I'm watching this because this is the only chance I'm gonna have to watch this. And I was lucky enough to find it at a thrift store. But I just have this memory with this episode, watching it with my sister. We rented it and we watched it together that night, and it has a fond memory to me. Plus, I love the fact that we got to see, you know, more of Shaggy's family. We got to see some of Scooby's family. I just loved the whole ancestry and kind of backstory to Shaggy and Scooby's family. I thought that was really cool to see, especially in an earlier episode of Scooby-Doo where, you know, not a lot of times they would go into backstories of the gang's like family history, and so I thought it was a lot of fun. Now for the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo.
The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo.
My favorite episode for this series is That's Monstertainment. This is with Zomba, I believe? Zomba? Is that her name? I believe that's it. The reason I like this episode the most out of this series is because I totally feel like the whole premise of this episode is kind of like what teens would do at this time of, the time that it released in the 80s, they're like getting together, watching late night monster movies and, like classic monster movies. I just find the aesthetic very pleasing. I mean, I love movies, I love TV shows and stuff, and I've always wanted to watch the classic monster movies. I need to. I don't know what's stopping me. I just need to. But I just totally like find this episode very pleasing, I guess, where they get sucked into this classic monster movie and they have to play the roles and whatever, and it's black and white and all this, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. I thought the story was a lot of fun, and the fact that they had to play the story out of the movie that they got sucked into to get out, more or less. I just thought it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, again, mainly because of the movie aspect of it. Now, for a Pup Named Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
My favorite episode of this series is The Sludge Monster from the Earth's Core. Now, this is the second episode of this series, and I remember watching A Pup Named Scooby-Doo growing up, waiting for the bus. I would watch it in the morning before school. This is that series that, I like eat my cereal and watch in front of the TV and whatever before school and stuff. And I remember this episode being one of the most exciting to me because we got to go into Scooby's doghouse, and I thought that was just so cool. And so this episode has always stuck with me as one of my favorite Scooby-Doo episodes because we got to go into Scooby's doghouse, and it ended up being this big old mansion type house and whatever. And I just thought that was a really fun story, like, oh, there's a monster in my doghouse. So we go into the doghouse, and it's, it looks like a normal doghouse, but then you go in and it's this big old house, and you're like, why is Shaggy not living in there with you and stuff? And I think it's a lot of fun. Plus, the monster is purple, and purple is my second favorite color after green. Has nothing to do with anything, but I'm just gonna point that out. Now, for What's New Scooby-Doo. My favorite episode of this series is It's Mean, It's Green, It's the Mystery Machine. I remember this episode getting the backstory on the Mystery Machine for this series. I thought it was super cool. I thought it was cool how the Mystery Machine had this previous history with this, band and whatever. And if you actually think about it, if you know history of Scooby-Doo, it's kind of cool because originally Scooby-Doo was going to be about a group of kids, which it still is, but that were a band, and they would solve mysteries in between gigs. And so this is kind of putting a wink and a nod to that. If you know your Scooby-Doo history, you know that the Mystery Machine was previously owned by a musical group, and I thought that was a really cool aspect. And plus, having like one of the most iconic things of Scooby-Doo turn against them, I thought was really, really cool and interesting. I thought it played a lot better than Scrappy being the villain. Now, I'm not going to do Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue just because I actually have not watched that whole series. Fake fan, am I? Probably. So we're gonna go on to Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. My favorite episode of this series is Night on Haunted Mountain. I just really, really enjoy this episode. It is a big episode within the overall story of Mystery Incorporated, but I just love the overall history that this episode brought. One of my favorite parts of this episode is actually the very, very end, when the conquistador spirit basically is like standing within the wrecked ship, and for the first time we hear Nibiru of the series, and then he laughs and is starting to disintegrate away and stuff. Honestly, that is like why I love this episode so much, because that's like when things start to really go down in this series, and it's kind of the first more or less confirmation of supernatural beings within this series. And I don't know, it's just something about the aesthetic of this episode I really enjoy. I like that they're on this mountain, you know, they're kind of desolate from society, and they're on this ship that has been just parked on this mountain, more or less docked on this mountain for who knows how many years. But there's all this history to Crystal Cove in this ship that nobody has really discovered. And I don't know, just the history of Crystal Cove, of everything within this episode, just makes it really interesting to me. Okay, and finally, for Be Cool Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby.
My favorite episode of this series is I Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Now, to be completely honest, the reason I like this episode so much is because my friends and I kind of have an inside joke with this episode. Not that they've really seen the episode, I just kind of explained it to them and then we kind of made an inside joke with it. So let me try to explain this with you. It's one of those things you have to be there to make it funny. So, if you guys don't know, my BFF, my sister from another mother, is Angie. And so we've always kind of talked back and forth of like, hey, I'm gonna make you my best man because like you're my best friend and whatever. You know, like since I won't have the choice of the bridesmaids and stuff for my wedding, like I'm gonna make you the best man, Angie, and whatever. So then we were like, okay, so for the best man speech, so then we've kind of talked about, well, Angie's got to come up with the best man speech then. And so we kind of talked back and forth that either her or I would do it, but since she just got married and that didn't happen, it's her turn, she's got to do it. Basically, what I really want her to do is to just go up for her best man speech and be like, and basically she'll go up, you know, to the microphone or whatever and just like, thank you, and walk off, and I will be the only one that understands what's going on, and everybody will just be confused, and I'll be like, you did it, thank you. And it's just because of, within the episode of I Scooby-Dooby-Doo, Shaggy has to come up with his best man speech for their best friend's wedding, and the whole time he's like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, I don't know what I'm gonna do for my best man speech. Scooby, help me, what do you think of this? And so then he tells Scooby what he has so far, and it's just like
Like,
Go on.
that's all I got so far. What do you think?
And so I'm like, if that could be a best man speech, Angie, you do it, please. Yeah, that's literally why it's my favorite episode. It just has this inside joke to me, to us, and yeah. I also do enjoy the fact of like putting Velma in a dress and she's kind of struggling and stuff. Like, I totally feel like that would be Velma, you know, being in a dress. She's like, I'm not comfortable in this. It doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel me and stuff. So I found that aspect fun as well. Now, I'm not including Scooby-Doo and Guess Who either, just because that series hasn't fully aired, and so I haven't quite seen all the episodes yet. But I will say one of my favorite episodes that I've seen thus far is the 1 Minute Mysteries episode, the one that has the guest star The Flash. I really enjoyed that episode so far. That was a lot of fun. If you have been able to see that episode, then you know which one I'm talking about and stuff, but I won't say much about it since it technically hasn't released in the US yet, so people probably haven't seen it, so I don't want to spoil stuff for that one because that one's a lot of fun. So guys, that's gonna do it. There is my favorite episodes of every Scooby-Doo series minus 1 or 2. I want to know what your favorite episodes are down below in the comments. Please let me know what your favorite Scooby-Doo episodes are from whichever series you want to tell me. Just, you can tell me all, you can tell me a few, you can tell me one, whatever you want. That's gonna do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you in my next one. Goodbye.